Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Direct Comparison. In today's episode, we're going to take a look at the open beta for this year's Call of Duty game, Vanguard, and see how it compares both visually and from a gameplay perspective to its developer's previous game, Call of Duty World War II. Now, for those of you not quite as familiar with this series and its development cycle, Call of Duty World War II, as the name suggests, is a World War II-centric entry to the series, created by Sledgehammer Games and released back in 2017. It was intended to be somewhat of a return to form for the Call of Duty series, following growing fan demand to return to a more grounded, realistic setting after the three futuristic-based Call of Duty entries before it. This game utilized an updated version of Sledgehammer's own proprietary engine that has arguably provided some of the more impressive visuals to the series during the 8th generation of consoles, and features photorealistic in-engine cinematics, improved lighting, physics, and tessellation effects. But Infinity Ward's own revitalized engine, first premiering with 2019's reboot of the Modern Warfare series, has since stolen the show as one of the most technically impressive in the entire series. Rather than trying to compete with that, Sledgehammer has instead adopted a sizable chunk of the code used to build Modern Warfare, and intends to tell yet another story during one of history's greatest conflicts. Because of this, many distinctive visual elements and even some gameplay mechanics first shown in Modern Warfare have made a return. And today, I want to give a brief rundown of some of the few observations that I've made so far, and how it stacks up to Sledgehammer's last attempt at portraying the Second World War. For reference, both games are being played on a PC, outputting at a native 4K resolution, with the graphics settings cranked up to their highest values. However, any motion blur settings will be disabled for cleaner image captures. Also, bear in mind that the footage I've captured of Vanguard is from an early beta build of the game. So because of this, it's possible some of the topics discussed, whether they be technical or gameplay based, may change by release, and I'll be sure to provide an updated analysis when that time comes. So let's kick off this comparison by first talking about the changes made to the presentation, starting with a look at some of the shared weapon models. Judging purely off the weapon models alone, Vanguard sports some pretty great visual improvements. Every weapon shared between these two games looks much sharper and more detailed in Vanguard, with more intricate details that were either blurry before due to the simulated depth of field, or just weren't there at all. When looking at this machine pistol, for example, we can now very clearly make out some textured grooves along the receiver, and the top sight and handle are now much sharper, as opposed to the muddy, indistinguishable textures used previously. The STG is another great example, where we can now make out a serial number on the receiver and are given a better impression of the various scratches along the metal, whereas before you sort of get the impression of scratches and dirt, but it's all kind of blurred together and hard to make out. The M1 Garand is especially impressive thanks to the much more visible wood grains along the barrel, and the polished receiver certainly stands out as well. Though, that being said, Vanguard does fall into the trap of having all these pristine, nicely polished weapons, rather than all dirty and beat up like we see in World War II. This is even more noticeable with the MP40, where it almost looks brand new in Vanguard, whereas in World War II it looks much more war-torn and grimy. Then there's the muzzle flash that just looks weirdly faded and muted in Vanguard. This is something I mentioned before when talking about World War II, where I felt the muzzle flash may have been too bright and exaggerated, though now it looks almost like they just made the alpha effect more transparent, as opposed to just reworking the effect altogether. Next, let's take a look at some of the environment designs. I think this is one aspect that Vanguard has really improved upon over its predecessor. World War II's map designs were arguably some of the weakest in the series, as they took that traditional 3-lane structure and didn't really do much else with it. Most of the maps feel almost identical to one another, save for a few minor exceptions. Verticality in particular is barely incorporated at all, and as a result, the maps are somewhat forgettable. While Vanguard is certainly still applying that same tried-and-true 3-lane approach to its core map design, there's a lot more going on to help each of its lanes stand apart. The Eagle's Nest map in particular is a far more interesting design, with one of the outside lanes featuring a long, columned path alongside the central building, with plenty of long-range engagements from the window and the opposite short wall, contrasting with the winding footpath on the other side of the map that suits players more accustomed to quick flanks and close-quarter encounters. Then there's the central lane that consists of several interconnected halls and rooms, with some fantastic dynamic destruction that I'll talk about more in a bit. Another solid map design offered here is Gavutu, a Pacific Island-based map with some great long-range sniping opportunities in the center, a King of the Hill style flanking route on the side, and a large beached ship running parallel to a two-story structure for some nice medium-range engagements. The next two maps are a bit more problematic though. Red Star, for one, feels a bit lopsided at times, with players frequently getting spawn trapped while a team occupies a adjacent second floor sniping position. And Hotel Royale is about as chaotic as can be, with a small 3-lane rooftop being combined with skylights for players to rain in from the ceiling into a cluttered central bar. But these unique scenarios only add to the variety offered in the game, and they'll no doubt appeal to players that prefer those particular playstyles. From a visual perspective, these maps are, for the most part, really nicely detailed. Red Star in particular looks fantastic, especially with its large density of particle effects, and its nicely decorated interior spaces. But it's the smaller maps that really had me impressed. The Eagle's Nest and Hotel Royale almost remind me more of the close quarters expansion to Battlefield 3 from years ago, with lots of dynamic props all primed to be completely shredded by sustained gunfire. The dining area in the center of Eagle's Nest looks pristine when you start the match, but by the end, the chairs are torn to shreds. The planked walls are peppered with semi-dynamic destruction, and the floor is littered with wood and other debris. It's really impressive to see this level of micro-destruction in a Call of Duty game, and it suits the chaotic playstyle perfectly. Though, I did find it to be a bit overwhelming in maps like Hotel Royale, where fiery red ember particles mixed with broken glass and other effects typically create a mask of visual noise that's oftentimes distracting. Red Star suffers from this a bit too, with its dense snow particles pouring in through windows, but because of the average range of engagements being longer and the map taking place during the day, it isn't quite as distracting. Speaking of lighting, I think this is an area where Vanguard is certainly lagging behind. This is an issue that has long plagued Call of Duty's multiplayer component, with the exception being the most recent Modern Warfare. Though, despite using that game's same engine, Vanguard's light design often comes off feeling a bit flat. The Red Star map looks okay, especially with those static volumetric light shafts pouring in through the windows, and I do appreciate the way that light is simulated reflecting off of the metal finish for weapons, even if it looks a little bit pixelated and blurry. But the overall color tone and depth of the scene feels way off most of the time, most especially in Gavutu. The colors feel almost too muted, even when considering it's supposed to be taking place during a mild rainstorm, and it gives the map a very dated appearance as a result. This is the same issue that World War II suffered from, where all the multiplayer maps had this weird, washed-out appearance. Though, considering the single-player campaigns often do a much better job with this, my guess is that this is done on purpose, both to maintain solid performance numbers while also maintaining a competitive atmosphere and keeping visibility more consistent with what the fanbase expects. So, overall, when considering Vanguard's visuals, I think it's mostly an improvement. This isn't necessarily that big next-gen leap players are likely expecting, but there's some really nice stuff going on here either way. The particle density is very impressive, and this, combined with the fantastic dynamic destruction effects, and the return of actual gore similar to the old Call of Duty World at War game, is a nice touch. So now, let's turn our attention to talk about some of the new gameplay features offered in Vanguard. Now, unfortunately, we are limited here in terms of game modes, so it's unclear exactly what we'll see added. But so far, I've not seen any mention of a return of COD World War II's signature War Mode. For those unfamiliar, War Mode was a special, objective-based, large-scale mode that allowed players to take part in larger attack-defend style battles. One team, for example, would play as the Allies as they stormed the beaches of Normandy, while the other team defended the pillboxes and trench lines as the Germans. The mode itself was a pretty interesting step for the series back then, but it never returned, as it did seem like a big departure from Call of Duty's core design, and it's likely not going to return with Vanguard. Vanguard does, however, feature a few new game modes of its own, including Patrol, where a single objective moves around the map and players need to earn points by standing around it. And then there's Champion Hill. Champion Hill takes the more intimate 2v2 gunfights from Call of Duty Modern Warfare and reimagines them into a sort of competitive elimination style event. Here, each team of players is given a set number of lives, and are randomly assigned to face off against another team of players in a nearby arena. The catch is that players all start with the same unmodified weapons, and need to either kill enemies to earn cash, or find it lying around to upgrade their weapon and purchase more weapons during certain buy phases. Whichever team survives being eliminated is declared the winner. It's a really interesting idea that kind of melds together Warzone with the well-received gunfight into something that will no doubt be a great addition to the series. Next, let's talk about the customization options. I think the best way to describe Vanguard is Modern Warfare, but with World War II themed weapons. It also doesn't necessarily feel anything like Call of Duty World War II. For one, COD World War II used this strange divisions concept for its class management. This limited players wanting to use specific hardware to a specific class that would make use of various abilities tailor-made for a certain playstyle. The infantry division, for example, was built for players that like to be aggressive, and originally featured a bayonet for the player's rifle, more magazines, and faster ADS movement. This was later changed for balancing, but the general idea remains the same. Vanguard scraps all of this though, in favor of the much more convenient Modern Warfare Gunsmith system. With this, players can make any class that they want, equip them with any weapon that they want, and select perks that suit their playstyle best. Weapons themselves can be upgraded through continued use, and equipped with an insane number of attachments, more than you'd actually expect from a World War II game. There's barrels, magazines, foregrips, stocks, scopes, grips, perks, and more than enough skins and other cosmetics to keep anyone happy. Whether or not it's realistic is a different discussion altogether, but I think we're long past that with this particular series. As for character customization, Vanguard's beta doesn't allow for any of that at the moment, but it'll no doubt use the same systems introduced in Modern Warfare and Cold War, where you choose a specific character and can modify the outfit from a few presets. Then of course, we have the gunplay itself. Again, Vanguard really is Modern Warfare with a World War II theme. All of the movement and controls are identical. You can perform active sprints by double tapping the sprint key, slide around corners, and even mount weapons to ledges and corners. But there are a few cool new additions that you might have missed. When you mount your weapons, for example, specifically on low walls, you can now slide the weapon left or right to adjust your position. Additionally, players can now blind fire from cover to try and shoot enemies without exposing themselves too much. Though this latter feature feels highly impractical from what I've seen, and will probably be more fun to play around with when playing offline in the single player campaign. One thing that I do wish was changed though is the way reloading is handled. This is possibly just a bug right now, but as it stands, reloading cannot be interrupted once it's been initiated. This means you can't sprint out of danger if you start loading up your MG42 or your Thompson, leaving you completely exposed. It's not something that occurred in Modern Warfare, and I would love to see this fixed before release. Finally, let's wrap up with a brief sound comparison.
What?
This is another major problem area for Vanguard. You've probably already heard talk of the audio in this game not being loud enough. However, I'm under the impression that this is not so much intentional as it is another bug, as many sound effects just seem to be missing. Sledgehammer has since acknowledged this issue and is likely already working on a fix. But in the meantime, what do you guys make of it? Which game do you feel has the superior audio quality and design? And that wraps up this episode of Direct Comparison. Overall, Call of Duty Vanguard is better than I anticipated. Sure, there's a few issues, like the Xbox versions are completely broken visually, the sun glare is blinding when you adjust the FOV, the lighting isn't all that impressive, and the sound is completely messed up. But aside from those technical issues, there's a decent World War II game that I feel a lot of people may end up writing off. World War II was a nice attempt to return the series to its roots, but it suffered from a lot of those pitfalls of more modern Call of Duty games, mainly in its uninteresting map designs and its overly scripted and small-scale campaign. But having played Vanguard's beta over the weekend, I was having a lot of fun with it. The micro-destruction, the great weapon customization options, and the mostly decent map design had me hooked all over again. And I'm looking forward to seeing how this entry shapes up with its final release. But what do you guys think? Are you interested in trying out Vanguard? If not, what about it don't you like? Let me know in the comments section. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this posted every week.